Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Have you ever felt a nudge from the Holy Spirit? Has that nudge led you somewhere that shocked you? Hey, this is Jen. You're listening to the Bible for Busy People, and recently I went to a Christian conference where I didn't really know anybody. There were a few women sitting around the auditorium starting to take their seats, so I said hello to one, and we kind of got into conversation. We related on a couple things. There was another woman who was sitting not that far away, and I just felt too uncomfortable to approach her, but something kept drawing me back. Finally, I sat nearby and I started talking with her. I probably overcompensated a little bit with my bubbliness, as I assumed she just felt alone or out of place like I did. But I could tell there was something weighing on her heart. And when I asked if everything was okay, she let me know that she had faced a devastating loss just that week. My heart broke for her. I felt compelled to pray together, and I left just amazed that the Holy Spirit hadn't let me walk away from her for a reason. There's no way I would have stayed on my own, pushing past that discomfort. I truly don't know if I helped that day. It was really hard to find the words, even in prayer, but I really hope that she felt seen and met by God in our interaction. This week, we're talking about metaphors and symbolism for the Spirit in the Scriptures. And today we're looking at both clouds and wind, because honestly, they seem the most related out of all the options, and I didn't want to skip either one. As we'll see in the Old Testament, a cloud represents the presence of God, protection, guidance, and the imparting of knowledge or wisdom. We're reading today in Exodus 13, starting in verse 21. It says, "By day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people." And then skipping ahead to Exodus 14, verse 19, it says, "Then the angel of God who had been traveling in front of Israel's army withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, 'Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt.'" Here we see how the pillars of cloud and also of fire guide the Israelites and also act as protection for them. And then a wind comes in to divide the waters, and God actually looks down through the pillar of cloud. All these details are really interesting to me. Now we'll look at another example of the Holy Spirit as a cloud, which is in Exodus 24, starting in verse 15. It says, "When Moses went up on the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain, and on the 7th day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain." It looks like cloud and fire are really hard to separate. Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up on the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Where God is too glorious, too majestic for us to see, the Holy Spirit seems to intervene and interact with us in a way that we can't directly with God. The Spirit represents the physical presence of God in a way that isn't too much for us to take in. We even see in Exodus 34, Moses is unable to see God in full glory mode. 2 Chronicles chapter 5 also shows the presence of God resting on the tabernacle as a cloud. Finally, during the Transfiguration, when Jesus takes on a dazzling appearance and talks with Elijah and Moses in full view of a few of his closest disciples, there is an element of cloud there. That's in Matthew 17. And in verse 4, it says, that Peter tried to interject here. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." So we have our examples of cloud, and then there's wind. Yesterday we talked about the Hebrew and Greek words for spirit, ruach and pneuma, respectively. Both can be translated as breath or exhalation, but they can also be translated as wind. Maybe the most memorable passage about the Holy Spirit as wind is in John chapter 3. This is where Jesus is speaking to the Pharisee Nicodemus at night. In verse 5 it says, "Jesus answered, 'Very truly I tell you, no one can enter the Spirit of God unless they are born of water and the Spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh, but the Spirit gives birth to spirit.' You should not be surprised at my saying you must be born again. The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit." The Spirit brings order to chaos, like we've talked about already, but also the Spirit is kind of maybe wild, at least unexpected or unpredictable to humans. We don't get all the details about why the Spirit is moving or where or how. We hear but cannot explain. We just follow. And then in Acts chapter 2, we see another example of the Holy Spirit showing up in wind. In verse 1, it says, "When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them." When the Spirit came upon the disciples, there was this whole big scene, including a violent wind from heaven. The Spirit, again, seems to represent God where we can't actually interact with God. It would be too much for us. It should be noted that not all examples of wind or breath are meant to represent the Holy Spirit in the Bible. But what do these images indicate to us about the Spirit? We don't control or predict how the Spirit moves. The Spirit is for us and is working for our good. The Spirit represents the very presence of God, and in one way of many, intercedes for us in such a way that we are able to connect with God. How has the Spirit acted as a pillar of cloud or fire in your life, leading the way even in ways you didn't expect? I'll leave you with that. Let's talk again tomorrow. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume 2 things about you. First of all, that you're a busy person, and second, that you are in need of a restful break. Cannon Beach Conference Center is the place for a beautiful coastal retreat, whether it's one of their enriching conferences or your own church or ministry event. You can find out more at 800-745-1546 or visit cbcc.net. Thank you to Cannon Beach Conference Center for sponsoring the Bible for Busy People.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.